There's a woman in the Bible whose name we don't know, whose voice we never really hear, and yet God refused to save the world without her. Funny enough, sometimes the most important people in scripture are the people we don't really hear from, the people who barely said anything. Today, we're talking about Noah's wife and why her presence tells us something very significant about marriage. So after talking about Eve, I started thinking about another woman in scripture who was never really ignored, even though we were not told her story in detail. Every time Noah is mentioned with his family, God is very careful to include her. Genesis chapter 7 verse 7. Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark. So let's start by remembering the kind of world Noah's wife lived in. Noah's wife lived in a violent world, a world where wickedness had become very normal. Does it ring a bell? Does it sound familiar? Yeah, we live in the same kind of world. And in the middle of that world where Noah's wife lived in, God spoke to her husband. And when we read the story of Noah, this is something we always miss. God did not just save Noah. He didn't ask Noah to build an ark and leave his wife behind. His entire plan for preservation was a whole family. We fail to understand that Noah's wife had a choice. Nobody dragged her into the ark. No one forced her to believe her husband. No one forced her to leave the world she knew behind. Do you know what that means? She was used to something and literally got uprooted from the world as she knew it, in obedience, followed her husband's instructions, passed down by God. She chose obedience. She chose to stand by her husband. She chose to trust God. So I want you to think for a moment what life inside that ark would have been like. Tight spaces, animals, noise, smell, no escape, no breathing space, everywhere just that was not a romantic scenario. That was daily endurance to the core. Hey, and most of us watching this cannot even do it. Do you know what it means to live with animals in the same place? And Noah's wife chose to endure these things with him. She guarded the home front. She was a mother. She had children. She was a mother-in-law. It wasn't recorded that Noah's sons had given birth to children, but with the way things were in those days, they probably had kids of their own, so she was most likely a grandmother as well. Some people read the Bible and just come to the conclusion that women are supposed to be insignificant and invisible in marriage. But I love Noah's wife because she challenges that very idea without even saying a word. Because I believe that if women were supposed to be secondary in marriage, then God would have written Noah's story differently. God did not say, Noah, I'll save you regardless of your wife. No. The ark had room for her because she was still required in the future. Noah and his wife were one. So when people come to the conclusion that the Bible, reduces women to tools or objects to be subdued, I ask myself one question. So why did God insist in the presence of somebody like Noah's wife? Biblical marriage was never about control. It's bigger than that. It's about covenant. It's about commitment. Noah's wife was committed to her marriage. She was committed to the head of the home. And that was a choice she made. Nobody forced her to do that, right? She was not subdued. She would have easily said, oh, I want to join the crowd. I don't want to enter the ark. That would have been her choice. Of course, the choice would have led to grave consequences, but at the same time, it was still her choice. This series exists because so many people quote scripture without understanding God's heart. We started with Eve. Today we're talking about Noah's wife. Next, we're going to be talking about Sarah, a woman who walked with promise from God, experienced delay, had to hold on to faith, and of course, made mistakes. And if this series has helped you in any way so far, please consider subscribing to this channel as we'll be churning out more series every week. We're just getting started. Thank you for watching. See you next time.